Sawate, mihi nomen est, Stella, et hoc est Batgirl the Oracle, the Barbara Gordon podcast, episode 251 for October MMXXIV. Batgirl the Oracle is brought to you by MileHighComics.com, your new and collectible comic book store. Mile High Comics has an inventory of over 5 million comics from the gold, silver, bronze, and modern age, and over 100,000 trade paperbacks. If you're not into the vintage stock, Mile High Comics also has a subscription service called the New Issue Comics Express, offering a discounted price for comics ready to hit the shelves. So if you're looking for vintage back issues or a great modern subscription service, be sure to check out milehighcomics.com. Well, I really just have two things to talk about in my intro. The first being that I was lucky enough to see Suffs on Broadway, went up last weekend and hung out with my friend Claire and saw that. And I really enjoyed it. It certainly delved into, I mean, it's about the suffragists or suffragettes, which was a line in there about we're not suffragettes, we're suffragists. But it delved into a piece, I think, of that history that I was not aware of, because certainly you think about the vanguard of women earning the right to vote, but this was certainly later and leading up to actually having that passed. And I enjoyed how they did not shy away from the ugliness of it as well. The fact that even though women of color are still women, that they tried to not have them in the march and alongside of them because they felt like it would be more palatable overall, the movement overall, um, to other people if it was just seen as like a white issue rather than steeping more issues. And I feel like that's just something that continued to be true and probably continues to be true today. But just thinking about the great gay rights movement, and even in the 50s and 60s with equal rights, and just like we don't, quote unquote, we don't want more issues. Like we don't want to tackle more issues. Let's focus on this one. And so I'm glad that they did not shy away from that ugly part of the history. So, highly recommend if you can. And that will be the song that leads you into part two. So you can at least get a taste of what it was like. And I didn't realize that the lead character was also the writer of the whole thing. So very much in a way of Lin-Manuel Miranda, doing the whole thing and then also being the lead character. But yeah, if you have a chance, then look up maybe some of the songs. I think they also performed for the White House, did a couple songs there. So maybe see a performance. And if you have the luxury, go up and get some tickets and go see it. And that leads me into the other thing that I want to say, because I will not see you all. This is the last episode before November, obviously. Won't see you before November 5th. So I just want to implore you to go out and vote. And I think early voting now is on, depending on what your state is and what the timeline is. So you could potentially have already voted. But I think it's just really important to exercise these rights that we have to go out and vote. And I can't tell you for whom to vote. You definitely have to vote, I think, with your conscience as well as what you think is for the best of this nation. But I would also hope that you think about the people that you have around you and your friends, and you look at them and think, "Am I voting for them?" I think that's a surefire way to potentially vote for the better person of the two. And I would also say, please don't be a two issue voter. I know that the two big issues are the economy and abortion. And I feel like to get an idea of who these candidates actually are, you really need to look at their whole platform and their stance on all of the issues. And well, if you don't, I guess that's all I'll say. But yeah, so just vote for sure and consider and think things through as you're voting. So that's all I'll say about that. And now I'm just gonna, yeah, get right into it and do some Batgirl issues. And last episode, I said that I felt like I was rusty in talking about Cass Kane Batgirl issues. And was I just completely out of it? Or could it have actually been the story that I was doing. And I think after reading this two issue arc, I think it might have just been the story, that the story from the previous issue wasn't as good as it could have been. And so I'm happy that we kind of get back into maybe a better storyline with 63 and 64. So I'm just going to get started. This is Batgirl 63 Could Have Been Part 1 Nowadays. June 2005 is the cover date. Writer Anderson Gabrick, penciler Ale Garza, inkers Jesse Dupperding and Andrew Pipoy, and colorist Wildstorm FX. And this synopsis comes from Comic Vine, so thank you. Batman is pleased with the work that Batgirl is doing in Blüdhaven, including using a Wayne Foundation grant to help those home and business owners under pressure to sell to McSweeney Realty. Meanwhile, the villainous society are not at all pleased with Batgirl's presence in the city due to her disrupting the arms deal with the Brotherhood of Evil. They send Deathstroke in to finish her off, and he soon attracts her attention by putting innocents in danger. She engages him, but soon realizes that he's toying with her. He actually intends her to fight his daughter, the Ravager. Okay. I will say that I very much enjoyed this opening sequence, and it's juxtaposed with the present day Cass and what she's up to. And really, I think taking, well, juxtaposing that with the past Cass and how she grew up, and just showing that while things have changed, some things stay the same. And if you have a good rhythm or a good manner of doing something, then why change something that works? And even though she grew up in a toxic lifestyle and situation, the training did actually work. So I do like seeing her and how she is still training. I always like training sequences in films. So this is just like daily life. I enjoy seeing that. Um, again, I don't know why this idea that Cassandra is a sex worker persists. Trying to think here where this happened. Yes, right here. So the non-Babs looking Brenda, or the non-Barbara, but Barbara looking Brenda, invites Cass to a party, and Cass says she might not be able to, and Brenda says, "Let me guess, quote unquote, work." And Cass says, "I told you it's not," and she says, I know, I'm sorry." But I just don't know why this is the thing that persists. What a weird line of like, is it supposed to be funny? I don't know. And then again, I still focus on the fact that does Cass have the ability to read social cues, which I think is something that I'm going to bring up in part two as well with the modern day birds of prey. I do like that Bruce gave Cass money, not only for the neighborhood, but in particular so that she could give money to this cafe that she knows. And he actually praises Batgirl for what she is doing, which I really appreciate because he doesn't often say, good job. So that's, you should take that and hold on to that for sure. Record it maybe and replay it on a rainy day. When she does, oh, I did find this interesting that she, and perhaps she had been doing this before, but I don't recall it, but she very much has a diary, and but it's an audio diary. And I think that that's great, but I wish again that she were transitioning and to reading and writing and doing that. But I guess we'll see if we get there. If my hope is that Brenda, and I've read this series before, I just don't remember, but my hope is that Brenda maybe helps her out, but we'll see about that. So then, yes, here another social cue issue. So Cass is wearing an outfit from Hot Topic, which, no judgment. I love Hot Topic. But I guess my question would be, do you feel like this is Cassandra Cain as a character, that would be the style that she would pick? Did she pick up on, again, those social cues and this way fashion from Brenda? Did she know that there was going to be a mosh pit for some reason? Like Brenda, when she talks about the party, doesn't really lead us to believe that it's going to be this sort of party, but there's definitely some jumping around and definitely like alt looking type of people and rock and everything. So I just wonder where this came from. And again, would Cass have been able to intuit that much from what we are given and what she has seen to get to this particular place? So I guess this is what it means. We have this scene with this guy who's pretty cute, and Cass look across the dance floor at each other, and then just start dancing together. And I suppose this is what it means in romances where, they saw each other across a room and gravitated towards each other, which I find amusing that it's like gravitated towards a hip check. And then they started dancing. So this fun levity is immediately disrupted by an explosion across town and going after some people that Cass had already that she had seen Brenda talk to, so they're a part of the neighborhood, and we get to see Deathstroke here. And I've always known that Deathstroke is, oh gosh, I don't think I realized that at the bottom of the page the husband was already killed. But I've known that Deathstroke is obviously a violent personality, but the fact that we actually witness him breaking that woman's neck with one hand, I felt like that was, well, I was surprised. I guess I shouldn't be, but also in this particular book, I don't know, was that too over the top, or we should just be used to it because Cass does, her character lens towards more violence and maybe like neutral dark or dark neutral compared to Stephanie Brown, for instance. But this just seemed like a lot. And I was shocked when I had read it. I like how when she is fighting Deathstroke, she describes his body moving like a choir, many different voices all at once, but singing too fast, too loud. So we can get from that she's keeping up, but she's not able to really um, overcome him, I think, as easily as she might other people. And I think that this makes sense given who Deathstroke is. One of my favorite scenes with Deathstroke actually is in Identity Crisis, where he takes out the Justice League in very particular ways to each of the Justice League members. And so I feel like this would, in fact, be a tough fight for her to keep up with. I like the fighting sequence. I feel like it is really well choreographed. I did ask some experts whether this seems to be an even match. And I think the answer came out like more or less yes. I think that there might be like wins on either side. And I think it depends situationally as well as environmentally what's going on. But I think that Deathstroke is certainly a challenge for Cass and would not be an easy beat, mainly because I think he is unpredictable. So yeah, he's going after her. Um, I mean, the whole fight sequence, which is just images and fighting and choreography and no speaking, really, I think is just really great and makes for a strong issue. And then you have that ending where Cass realizes that Deathstroke is toying with her, but wonders why. And then Ravager appears and she says, he's saving you for me, which I found very interesting. So then we go on to issue 64. Apologies, here we go. Could have been part two, Gone Daddy Gone. July 2005 is the cover date. Writer Anderson Gabrick, penciler Ale Garza, inkers Jesse Delberding and Andrew Pipoy, and colorist Wildstorm. Again from Comic Vine, Batgirl battles the Ravager while Deathstroke watches to see whether his daughter can kill the hero. Realizing that Ravager constantly craves her father's attention and approval, Batgirl is able to use this against her, defeating her opponent, although she knows that once she heals, she'll be back to finish the job. And I did forget to talk about the previous issue cover, which was interesting because the person on it doesn't seem like it's Cassandra. It looks like it's Lady Shiva. And there's a guitar in the background, which certainly relates to the the party that happens, but not much else. I think this cover is more emblematic of what's actually going on. Though Batman, I think, doesn't need to be in the background like that, but it's really, I think, a comparison of daughters fighting and then their fathers watching. Though I feel like we do miss something by not having David Kane there because I feel like he is more present in the background of this story than Batman is at this point in time. So we do start off, which is good because you wonder how did Deathstroke even come into this story, and so we get that background, which I appreciate. And then we're immediately back into what is happening here with Ravager versus Cassandra. And here I will say that the use of and in her bubbles are starting to annoy me. Just I feel like the ellipses are a much better use of demonstrating a delay of thought or speech rather than this. So we've got, for an example, she's good, but a greenhorn. A TV cowboy said that once, which is just interesting. Means young, not just age and or experience as well. And so I try not to. I know that I have fillers on this show, but like, why? Why? Well, I just use one. Like, it's definitely something that we should get rid of. So the fact that she's using as a place rather than silence, I think in terms of rhetoric, if we are talking about that and how I could encourage you all to speak well, take your silence rather than saying I think that that is a frequent issue actually on podcasts where someone asks a question and then the person who's receiving that question immediately wants to jump in and answer that. And if they don't have something ready, they'll say, and then they'll go into it. Whereas I've started to in the past few years taking that space before I want to answer so that I don't have that placeholder. So there might be silence, but I think that that's fine rather than jumping in and not having your thoughts completely organized or an answer ready to go. And instead of saying, and I don't know where she got this particular mannerism from or speech mannerism, I guess I'll say, but I wish we would stop with this, but I'm not writing this book and it's also done. So what can I do? Let's see, I talked about the opening scene and now we know why those real estate people were sniffing around and that they were most likely employed by Penguin. And um I think overall, if I just want to talk about because the fighting sequence is great, I really have no notes on how the fighting goes and progresses throughout this issue. I really highly recommend picking these two issues up to see this. But I think the most powerful thing about this issue is that it compares the relationships between Ravager and her father, Deathstroke, and Cass and her two fathers, though, really, as I said, focusing more on David Kane. Not only how they grew up and how they were taught, but I think you see differences too in the care. At one point, yeah, David just throws Cass off the building, but that's because he trusted that she wouldn't get hurt. And then we see a bit of Batman. And I think in the way that Ravager is constantly looking for Deathstroke's approval, I feel like that's very much like Cass looking for Batman's approval. I'm not sure if, I mean, perhaps she always looked for David Kane's approval as well. But I also, when I look at this whole issue, it seems like Deathstroke cares more for Rose than David Kane cared for Cass? Because I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like if Cass were mortally wounded, because that is how we end this particular episode, is that Cass, I think, knows that she's in a bad situation and she's not going to win unless there's some sort of fatality, either hers or another person. So she mortally wounds Ravager and then basically leaves that sword in there, leaves it up to Deathstroke that you have this amount of time, so you can either go after me or you can save your daughter. And the fact that he chooses his daughter over Cass. I just think that if Cass were mortally wounded and David Kane were given the same option or choice, that he would basically say, she's failed me, so now she can deal with the consequence, which is death, rather than this. And again, I could be wrong, but I just feel like even though maybe Deathstroke isn't capable fully of a love that might be standard to us, that I think there is care and concern, whereas David Kane, I think his care and concern is really perverted. And also, I think it's very easy to lose his love. But I could be wrong. I'd love to, yeah, hear from the cast experts because that's definitely not me. I'm just whatever I see here. So yeah, I mean, and Cass does really well here intelligently, not only with the wound that she gives, but then knowing that Deathstroke will not kill Cass because it is not his job. It was Ravager's job. And so she knows that he has that level of, I guess, respect and a sense of shame attached to it as well. So, whew, yeah, it was a pretty intense ending. I mean, it's shocking what she does, but it's just it's very strategic, and I applaud her for because she was in a really bad situation and she had to figure out quickly how she was going to manage it. Yeah, I think that's basically what I have to say. It's just like I constantly just bring up the fighting. I think that that is great. What is being said in words and actions, Deathstroke watching and wanting to intervene but not, and pushing his daughter and following as the fight progresses, I thought was really interesting. And yeah, so I really liked this pair of issues. This pair of issues. Yeah, that works. And I recommend reading 63 and 64. Found it very captivating. And I would give this this is very shocking, but a 9 out of 10 helicopter parents for this issue alone. And golly, that look at how quick that was. That that's all I have for my vintage issues. And there were no listener emails. So I can just move on and we're getting to the break area basically. So when I come back, I will cover some modern quickies. No, that's incorrect. Sorry. When I come back, I will do a full review of Birds of Prey, Volume 5, number 14. But first, Zaius's Radio Hour featuring The March, We Demand Equality from Suffs the Musical. See you soon.